2019 was a very busy year. As you approach this second session of this Congress, what are you hoping to accomplish?
Well, I'd like to build off the success we had in 2019. We got 4 bills signed into law by the president, 2 helping our veterans, 1 dealing with a local manufacturing company, getting that bill done, and then another to repeal a health insurance tax that was set to go into effect in 2020. Going forward, I want to build off that bipartisanship and focus on issues, especially in our rural communities. I'm working on a bill with Senator Grassley in the Senate, the Seeding Rural Resiliency Act, which would provide more resources into rural communities to deal with mental health issues. And then also focusing on prescription drugs, which is, again, the #1 question I get whenever I go to a town hall meeting.
I want to ask you this because you bring up an interesting point with just working with Senator Grassley on a piece of legislation. Obviously, there's been a lot of partisanship, a lot of gridlock here in Washington. How do you plan on working around that in 2020? And it's heightened now more than ever because we have a Senate impeachment trial that is getting ready to take place.
What I've learned in my time here is that everything is about building relationships, and the first thing you got to do that is be able to listen to one another. That's something that I've done over my first year here, sitting down with colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and why we were successful in getting that many bills signed into law by the president. Not getting caught up in the whole political fray of Washington, but really just sitting down and trying to work on common sense solutions that are going to help people in places like upstate New York. So I think we can build on that in 2020, and that's what I look forward to doing this year.
You all passed more than 300 pieces of legislation, House Democrats, I should say, and 275 of those were bipartisan pieces of legislation. How do you plan on, in terms of working with your counterparts in the Senate, how do you plan on getting senators to act on a lot of the legislation that was sent over to the upper chamber?
Well, it's been frustrating, but I think that in my conversations with senators, there's a strong willingness to act upon some of the legislation. I would say the areas that is most ripe for bipartisan support is around the issue of prescription drugs. We passed a landmark bill at the end of the year to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices with drug companies, something they haven't been able to do, and also to cap out-of-pocket expenses. That passed with bipartisan support in the House, and I think the Senate should act on pieces of that legislation. I've been meeting with a group of senators through the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a bipartisan group in the House, 23 Democrats, 23 Republicans, and we've been meeting on a monthly basis with a bipartisan group of senators looking at issues like prescription drugs and where we can work together to get some things done. I'm always an optimist, and I think that we can build on some of the success we had in 2019 that we passed on a bipartisan basis at the end of the year. The big area that I think we need to focus on right now is prescription drugs. We got this big bill passed in the House that would allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices and cap out-of-pocket expenses, which is something that I hear frequently across the district and at town hall meetings that I conduct. So I think we need to come together now with what the Senate is working on in terms of prescription drugs and see how we can marry those 2 pieces of legislation together and hopefully bring it to the president to sign, who has indicated he also wants to do something about prescription drugs.